Shall we begin? Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Julie Millard, and I am in Sydney, Australia. Actually, today I'm in Perth, Australia, sorry. As a board director and the chair of the Women's Mental Health section for the World Federation for Mental Health, I would like to welcome you all to this important webinar. It's wonderful to see so many people attending from across the world, and especially from Spanish-speaking countries. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians and Indigenous peoples of all the world, and to pay our respects to their elders and to their care of the land, the sea, and the air. I also acknowledge the lived and living experience of people living with mental health issues and emotional distress, their families, their carers, and their kinship groups, and recognise their contribution to improving mental health services globally. The webinar will consist of 3 excellent presenters, a performance piece, a Q&A panel, and a wrap-up and call to action. The Women's Mental Health section is a component of the World Federation for Mental Health. The vision of this section is to enhance the visibility of the Women's Mental Health section by advancing, advocating, and facilitating networks to promote the mental health and mental well-being rights of all girl children and women, and to elevate the voices of women with lived experience of mental health conditions across the world. I would like to thank the members of the webinar working group for their hard work in putting this webinar together, and to personally thank Sylvia Raji for ensuring this webinar is translated into Spanish. It's been a beautiful effort. Thank you, Sylvia. I would now like to introduce Dr. Elizabeth King, who is the moderator for today's webinar. Dr. King is an esteemed thought leader and academic who specialises in leadership development, with a special focus on navigating uncertainty in complex environments. Her work has explored the multifaceted challenges that women face in the workplace, particularly the intersection of gender and mental health. Dr. King has contributed to research examining how society's expectations shape women's entrepreneurial experiences and mental well-being. As an advocate for promoting gender equity and mental health in organisational settings, she draws on her academic insights and her practical leadership experience to offer strategies that help workplaces foster healthier and more inclusive environments. Her published works, including those examining the role of media in shaping gender perceptions, add depth to her understanding of the pressures women navigate in the professional spaces. I thank you all for attending, and I look forward to the fantastic presentations we're about to hear. Thank you, Liz. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Julie, and thank you everybody for attending today. It's a particularly precious opportunity, and I'm extremely excited about what we're going to experience together. We've got people, as we can see, coming in from all over the globe, and people who would have had different workplace experiences and different motivations for coming here today. We would love, if you're comfortable, for you to pop some things into the chat as we go through our time together, so we can know more about what interests you about this topic. The overarching objective is, of course, for all people to be flourishing at work, for workplaces to be places of healing. One important step is the focus of this webinar, which is to understand women's mental health and the relationship between the workplace and women's mental health. Women's mental health in the workplace is affected by a range of complex challenges, as we'll hear about today. from the glass ceiling to losing the very foundations of their life due to workplace bullying and systemic gender bias. We'll see this highlighted in two of our presentations in particular. Further, in many regions around the world, women face even more substantial barriers, increased pay inequity, increased discrimination, lack of advancement of opportunities, and the resultant struggles of PTSD, burnout, anxiety. This makes some and many women unable to re-enter the workforce. Sorry. Our conversation today will include global strategies to address these challenges shared by Dr. Jasmine Vergara. And we're looking forward shortly to introducing Jasmine, who will be talking to us about very specific practical strategies we can all apply in our own workplaces. Together, the perspectives that you'll see today will underscore that addressing women's mental health at work is an economic imperative, and it requires us all to be committed to policy integration and leadership. So now I'm very honoured to introduce to you Dr. Jasmine Vergara. She's going to talk to you about women for mental health at work. Dr. Jasmine is the Technical Officer on Mental Health and Substance Use at the World Health Organization, the Regional Office for the Western Pacific, which supports member states in the development and implementation of policies and programs related to mental health and substance use. Dr. Jasmine is the recipient of the World Health Organization Director General's Award for Excellence in 2022 and is a member of the World Health Organization's Special Initiative for Mental Health Philippines 3-level team. Dr. Vergara was featured in the World Health Organization's Who's Who video series, which tells the stories of World Health Organization colleagues and the work that they do to promote health, keep the world safe, and serve vulnerable people. She's also featured in the book Celebrating Women's Voice in Western Pacific Regions, Leadership, Diversity and Health. And to really capture the preciousness of this presentation, we are honoured to know that Dr. Vergara believes that we should always be ready to see the good in each individual and to support each other's growth. Welcome.
Thank you, Liz, for that beautiful introduction. And good evening from Manila to everyone. I know there are different time zones, so I hope you can hear me well. Right. Thank you. And allow me to share a presentation on behalf of our director for the Division of Disease Program of the WHO Western Pacific Region. She cannot join us today, Dr. Hong Tran. And also, as you know, our director for mental health at the global level is a woman, also Deborah Castell, and colleagues also that are joined with us today. So let me share my presentation. Yeah. I just wanted to also share with you all that I am also a person with lived experience of depression back in 2007, 2008. This is actually the one that Liz has mentioned that I was featured in one of those stories, and I'd be glad to share that link for you to know that I am coming from a person with lived experience as also an advocate for mental health at the WHO. So allow me to walk you through why we should actually address mental health at work. So here are the facts, right? So there is a relationship between work and mental health. When work is under good or decent conditions, it protects mental health. It gives us meaning, it gives us a purpose in life as a woman, reaching our dreams, our potential, and give us a sense of fulfillment, and gives us also some form of income. If you are a person with a mental health condition, good work when a person is supported promotes recovery and inclusion. But work can also have a negative impact on mental health. We all know that when there are negative working conditions and or many risks to mental health at work, also faced by women, such as heavy workloads, inequality and discrimination, bullying and harassment, or unsupportive colleagues and supervisors, or inflexible conditions, and more. In fact, in global data, 1 in 6 or 15% of working age adults is estimated to live with a mental disorder. It goes about 60% of the world is in work. And an estimated of 2 billion workers, over 60% of the global worker population are in the informal economy. So compared to the formal sector, informal workers, who are often women or members of the marginalized groups, are not offered social protections that provide access to health care, or coupled with low incomes and poor working conditions that are risk to likelihood of poor mental health. So the bigger the cost of poor mental health is one of the quality of life, is on quality of life, self-esteem, and well-being of an individual person. It affects how well we can work and our enjoyment of work, and whether we can work or need to take absence or choose to leave the job entirely. But workplace also and society feels that is the cost as well. So around estimated 12 billion or productive days, work days, are lost every year due to depression and anxiety, costing about global economy nearly $1 trillion per year. So there has been some precedent in events or instruments that has been calling to protect mental health at work. So these are the form of the Sustainable Development Goals, or the promotion of mental health and well-being and the prevention of mental conditions has been recognized in this lens. The WHO Comprehensive Mental Health Action Plan, spanning from 2013 to 2030, that sets a goal of objectives for the promotion and prevention of, and for the provision of comprehensive, integrated, and responsive services. In the Western Pacific region, we have also developed a regional framework for mental health that address this lens and how this can be implemented. The WHO Global Strategy on Health, Environment, and Climate Change, as well as for decades, convention from the International Labor Organization, or have called for the protection of workers' physical and mental health through national policies. However, in implementation, there has been more focus on protecting the physical health and safety of workers, and less focusing on protecting mental health, although both are very equally important. So in this context, one issue is that the quality or effectiveness of mental health intervention outside of the health system is not always well regulated. Examples: some well-being apps or that are available, left and right or in the market, or some programs or trainings that offered in the workplace that are not evidence-based. So in order to make sure that the workplaces are equipped or are investing in the right evidence-based measures, meaning that these are effective in achieving the purpose of protecting mental health, we have, we'll introduce to you the guidelines. So briefly, I'm sure you probably have seen this. This is the WHO guidelines on mental health at work, released in 2022 rather, in September, and the WHO ILO policy brief. So we will a little focus on these two instruments. And the first is the WHO Guidance of Mental Health at Work. As mentioned, it provides evidence-based recommendation that provides statement and called for WHO recommendations. These recommendations say that what interventions or approaches can work, at work can be done. And then the next is the WHO ILO policy brief. This is a product that takes into the science-based recommendations from WHO and in the context of how these interventions can be delivered. So if there is the what, if the WHO guidance is the what, the ILO policy brief is the how to deliver this. So which interventions are more of interest when WHO was asked to develop these guidelines, we followed some, scoping of evidence, discussion with experts, and we looked at different interventions. This will be going into organizational interventions, those which protects workers from risks that they experience at work. Example in the form of offering flexible working hour policies for women, or women with children at home, or they have to attend to their family at home, or issues in work-life prioritization. We have also some intervention in the form of manager training, which is training which skills up managers to better support their workers or with or without mental health conditions. Workers training in the form of addressing the mental health knowledge or increasing the awareness of employees. There are also some form of focus on individual intervention, which includes some form of psychosocial interventions such as stress management or physical initiatives, physical activity initiatives, and some return to work programs which support people to re-enter work after a period of absence due to mental health. So it doesn't stop from just intervention or providing that care to the person who may have a mental health condition, but providing that space that that person can actually thrive at work, and some vocational support programs which support to people living with severe conditions. I'll maybe touch on something on the screening programs. Yeah. So which populations were our interest of this guidelines? So in the WHO guidelines, recommendations have been made, particularly populations of interest. So there are different sectors, but mostly WHO's asked for this different sectors or people or population of interest. So for people living with mental health conditions, whether they may be seeking for new employment, on absence due to mental health conditions, or currently at work. So for people who may be at risk for mental health conditions because they are more likely to be exposed to the adversity at work, such as also where women also are facing, such as health and humanitarian national health emergency workers. And of course, there are many as mentioned, there are many other sectors who face tremendous risk to their health at work. But this just group of populations were focused on, as WHO usually receives this request for guidance for this group. So we'll just streamline this discussion. And then some universal population, when meaning that this intervention can be offered to workers, to the whole workforce, regardless of their mental health status. So the recommendations, the WHO guideline recommendations look at this different group of interventions, as I have mentioned earlier. The population can be the focus, and what is the effectivity or the expected outcomes. So WHO recommends that in organizational interventions are effective for reducing emotional distress or improve work-related outcomes. It doesn't. It just have. Sorry. The thing is, we need to address mental health at work as a comprehensive approach, not just one approach that is just focusing on one aspect. Let's say individual intervention. We'll also go into looking at managers training for mental health. This is highly recommended, which is effective for improving managers' knowledge, attitudes, and behaviors for mental health, and improving workers' to help seeking behaviors. For worker training for mental health literacy and awareness, it can be targeted for any workforce or at-risk workforce, also especially also for us women. It is effective for improving the trainee mental health knowledge and stigmatizing attitudes. For individual interventions, such as psychosocial interventions and physical activity, it is effective in improving positive mental health, reduced emotional distress, and improved work related outcomes. It is important also to look at who would be who can benefit in this intervention, and you also look at the different forms of intervention. I just like to actually point you to the screening programs in the guidelines. Where we actually don't have there's no recommendation made in favor or against screening programs for mental health at work. The benefits for mental health were not observed in the literature, and the harms for people were identified as workers reported that the concerns regarding stigma on how their data are actually being used. However, recognizing that some work sectors engaging in screening programs by necessity, or some form of regulation of the work, the guidelines include principles that should be followed should a screening program should take place. So if there would be screening programs in your work environment or in your organization, we should ensure that there would be timely access to evidence-based clinical intervention or care for people who could be screened positive for certain conditions or distress, right? Or making sure that the qualified health worker conducting the screening is impartial, and there should be protection and confidentiality and of the privacy of the data and respecting non-discrimination. So there be some screening programs. So we just have to point this out. So other key messages in the guidelines are including intervention should be offered, as mentioned, comprehensively. There is usually a tendency to only focus on interventions such as stress management. Automatically, when they hear about mental health at work, okay, let's do a stress management program. But in work settings, but they are unlikely to have long-term benefits without addressing the risks through organizational intervention or by training managers. So this has to be, addressed comprehensively. We also need to address research gap and agenda. So just to point you why we have a joint policy brief with WHO and ILO, as mentioned. Mainly, this is addressing the governments, employers, and organizations which represent employers and workers. So allow me to just walk you through to the strategies of the ILO policy brief. So there is the prevent, protect and promote, and support. So these are the key strategies recommended in order to take effective action to improve mental health at work. So when we talk about prevent, so workers, this is to actually prevent workers from experiencing the risks of their mental health at work. So if people are not protected from their risks to their mental health, there is unlikely that much else will be improved. So it depends on the work setting. So it depends also what kind of risks or needs to be addressed in the workplace. So it has to be looked into the different settings, such as workloads, as mentioned, bullying, limited autonomy, inflexible working conditions, and more. So as mentioned, one way to prevent this risk is looking at the organizational intervention. And as women, we would encourage you advocate for ourselves, advocate, have a sit, when there are town hall meetings, when there are addressing concerns on the workplace or an organizational discussion, please show up there, address and share your insights of how the voices of women can be heard. Next, into protect and promote mental health at work. This is the strongest recommendation, is to ensure that managers and supervisors have been trained to have the skills that they need to have better interpersonal skills, to lead people, such as active listening skills, supportive stance to their supervisees or employees. Critically, the third one is people living with mental health conditions need to be supported to participate at work and thrive at work. So these are just some of the strategies of how we can shape better mental health at work. So there are 7 cross-cutting actions that have been also addressed. But I'd like to just point out some items on leadership, especially when women, having to be there to strengthen the commitment to mental health at work. So this means ensuring that there is a lead in the organization for the mental health workforce. So there's a dedication to leadership and resource investment. So if we talk about advocacy, we talk about planning, it has to have some form of investment that they say that they have so they don't have to say that's underinvested, but it has to have some form of a line item in your organization to have this implemented. Work can be an environment that amplifies issues that we see in the wider society. So this is in the form of stigma, discrimination, right? So having to have addressing the rights or upholding the people's rights to fully and effectively participate in work. This is something that we need to also address. And another element that we as women would like to emphasize is that this is why we also need to highlight our participation. So decisions should not be designed, planned, and made without us or including the people it affects, whether they are workers or persons representing workers, as women and people living with mental health conditions. So when we are have the opportunity to voice out our concerns, so it can further shape policies, it can further shape the programs in our workplaces. So this year, as we all know, and thank you for the World Federation for Mental Health for joining WHO in celebrating Mental Health Day at work. So we have actually also celebrated this in the WHO Western Pacific region. Briefly, I'd just like to share with you, in the region, it is actually coupled with Eye Health, World Sight Day, so it's World Mental Health Day. We had a couple of weeks long activity where women artists guided the workforce in developing some collaborative art works that exemplifies, we asked our workforce rather, to what actually are the benefits of work for your mental health. So it's the other way around, having, rights, having a caring environment, having friendship, having good relationships. So this was echoed in the art pieces. And this was presented during a recent regional committee meeting. You can find them in our online exhibit. So we exemplify this with our women leaders at the WHO Western Pacific region. So I'm sorry, these are the paintings that I was mentioning. So you can find them also online. And if you happen to visit Manila, these paintings are in our offices. So what is WHO now working on the area of mental health at work? So what's next? We have shared earlier that the importance of WHO manager training, recommendation on manager training for mental health. So there will be an upcoming product that will be released. This is following the strongest recommendation in the guidelines, which is we're in favor for training managers and supervisors to protect the mental health of their teams by developing this manager training, which will be available by the end of 2025, and it will be called Ascend. So managers are a key population in the workplaces, and our managers are models for behavior at work and are influential to the workers' mental health. So this training will equip managers, supervisors to be able to discuss emotional distress with their employees, maybe facing and appropriately support the distress individuals within professional boundaries. Managers also would be able to support workers who have a mental health condition and who would need reasonable accommodation to work, or who would be returning to work after a sickness or a sickness absence, and actually also help equip managers to prevent risks to their employees' mental health. So this training is being developed currently as a facilitator's guide and it will be approximately conducted maybe 4 to 6 hours face-to-face, delivered by a trainer rather, and an online self-taught based training may be something that is forthcoming in the future.
We need to finish
So,
in a minute.
oh yeah, yes. Sorry for that. This is my last slide. And what is the training, WHO manager training for mental health? It's not, it's not designed to make managers mental health professionals, but instead it will be used, it will allow everyday managers to better support employees. It's not designed for a leadership training, but can be incorporated to leadership curriculums. And it's not designed to change negative behaviors in management, such as bullying, but can add skills to improve managers' communication with workers, such as active listening. With that, I close my presentation and thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jasmine. What an extraordinary presentation. You shared with us why, what, how, specific strategies, the 3 recommendations, and the hope of the Ascend program. Thank you so much. Everybody, if you've got some thoughts to share about Dr. Jasmine Vergara's presentation, please do. If you've got any questions about it, we hope to have some time at the end of our time together. For now, I'm delighted to introduce our next speaker. We have the opportunity to go from global strategy to personal experience. And in doing so, we get the full spectrum and we get to really understand the full range of what we're dealing with. Shelley Oldman, welcome. Shelley's going to share with us her personal experience in a presentation she's titled Breaking the Glass Ceiling, Bearing the Weight, Workplace Bullying, Women's Mental Health, and the Cost of Lost Leadership. Shelley has been a senior government and corporate leader. She's provided advice to governments globally for over 30 years. The dedication, the long hours of hurly-burly and corporate life brought her to a new point. It was a point where Shelley was forced to live inwardly, to heal from extreme bullying, and to understand her own journey of mind that just was not what it had been in the past. Dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder has become her life mission, one of inquiry, loss, opportunity, and learning that she's generously sharing with all of us. Prior to her diagnosis, Shelley had been a senior vice president of government solutions for the French headquarter advisory firm Capgemini. She was only one of 3 women senior vice presidents in the organisation at the time. Shelley's also been a CEO of an International Olympic Committee company working on the Athens, Turin and Beijing Olympic Games. So what we know is we have a very senior, experienced, competent woman who's been on this journey many women have shared. Shelley holds an MBA in International Management and a Master's in Mental Health from Nantian Institute, so she has a broad and deep expertise, personal and intellectual. With that, I'm delighted to introduce Shelley Oldman to our group.
Thank you very much, Liz, for that very broad introduction, and welcome to everybody from all around the world. I'm just going to share my presentation quickly, which will get us to where we need to go, hopefully, if the technology works. There we go, hit the share button. There we go. I think it's good to just touch a little bit on why this title. I was, throughout my working life, had the experience of being the first woman in many places, and I'm going to talk a bit about that. And I was also acknowledged as being pretty tough and pretty strong. And I'd seen all sorts of things that I'm going to talk about and experienced many different things in the workplace. But workplace bullying is the greatest contributor to women's mental health, certainly in Australia at least. Over the years of my time going through my professional development and my career, I experienced many microaggressions, which I'm going to talk about and explain what they are and give you some examples. And those microaggressions, I now realise, were a bit like Chinese water torture dripping on me over years. They were things I put in the back of my mind, telling myself that this was man's bad behaviour in the workplace and they would eventually get over it. But I realised when the critical incident happened that caused me to be diagnosed with PTSD, I realised that those microaggressions were a critical part of what happened. And just listening to Dr. Vergara talking about the great work they're doing there, I think there's a real need to address this thing called microaggressions. Just a little bit of background about Australia. Workplace mental health injuries in Australia contribute to $6.5 billion worth of investment on behalf of the government to try and repair those, and women are disproportionately represented in those numbers. With my diagnosis of PTSD, I am one of the lucky people who's in the 70% of women in Australia who have bullying-induced PTSD, and that is 40% higher than the same outcome for men. And to put that in context, if you think about, we all know that the military service is certainly in Australia and in many countries leaves people with PTSD, police force, all of these sorts of places. Women are not highly represented in those workplaces. So knowing that women have a more disproportionate representation means that there is something different about how women are treated and something different about what happens for women. I refer to that, what happens with women, as triple jeopardy. So there are gender roles that have expectations in society. There's the emotional labour burden, and there's the issue of work-life, professional workforce. People expected me to be nurturing. They expected me to be the soft one to sit in the background. They expected a whole range of other things. As a strong woman, I was often referred to as aggressive, which I found quite interesting because I'd never really threatened anyone and I'd never really assaulted anyone and I'd never done anything terribly difficult. And some of those microaggressions, when I was writing this presentation, I started remembering some of them. You know, things like partners at a big consulting firm I worked at would say to me regularly, "So how does your husband cope with the fact that you earn more money than him?" And when I was focused on results, they'd say to me, "Oh, you're just too tough, you are, and you're quite standoffish for a woman." Things such as when I would put an idea forward in a group of men, where I was often the only woman in the room, they would be sent to a group of men to sense check, to check whether I knew what I was doing. I was once overlooked for a promotion, having grown my part of the business significantly, built a huge team, very successful, working on the international board, and I was up for a promotion. And when I got the feedback, everybody met and they came to me, and some poor man must have drawn the short straw out, and he came to me and he said, "You know, we all agree you've got fantastic results and everything you've done is wonderful, but we just see you as too aggressive to be, you know, in this role." And as I said, I was never really aggressive. And the international company that I worked for, Capgemini, that Liz referred to, I was in Barcelona one year. We had a big board meeting there and I was called to join the international board, which was quite an honour. And as I'm sitting with them having dinner and we're talking, I started to explore why me. And 12 men sitting at the table started laughing and said, "You mean you don't know? It's because you're the prettiest one." And I don't think from that moment that I really ever recovered. I remember going and gathering, we were going to an international board meeting. One of the professional services firms I worked for was merging and I was leading the merger. And I went to our local partner senior executive meeting with my boss and we had to get input from them and feedback. And I remember at the end of the meeting, my boss standing up, and this was supposed to be a joke, where he said, "Well, if any of you think I'm going to sleep with Shelley while we're away, etc., etc." And those little microaggressions sit in the back of my mind now. They kind of washed over me. But for all of us as women, we see them, we hear them, and they are ever present every day. Once you start paying attention, you will see them. The other issue that goes on for women is the emotional labour burden. Because we're expected to have soft skills, often in the workplace, you're the one that's asked to handle other people's emotions or to navigate workplace dynamics with diplomacy. What that means for you then is if you've got a mental health injury, you're expected to always be this soft, nurturing person. And then the work-life balance. For all the theory that we can be super women and we can have it all is absolutely mythological. In the period that I grew up, we were supposed to have good careers, we were supposed to be fit and good looking, we were supposed to have nice families, nice homes. Everything was meant to be perfect. And there's just a little anecdote I want to give you about Australia that kind of points out the subtlety that lives in society that pushes us into that pressure. We have an insert in a printed newspaper every week here, a magazine that goes out on a weekend for people to read while they're relaxing. In that magazine, over the last couple of years, they have featured two very senior legal professionals, two of our top barristers known as superstars. One of those is a woman called Sue Chrysanthou. The other is a man called Robert Richter. The heading, just the heading alone leads you into one of these microaggressions. For Sue Chrysanthou said, avenging angel or lethal opportunist. The heading for Robert Richter, the man, said the man prosecuting George. The article on Sue Chrysanthou talked about her unruly hair, her lack of makeup, her dress sense, her chaotic house, her inability to cook. And yes, she was apparently quite ruthless as a lawyer. The article on Robert Richter talked about his razor-sharp legal brain, his capacity to win at all costs. It was just so blatant that this microaggression still keeps going, and Sue Chrysanthou was expected to do all of these wonderful things, whereas Robert Richter was just expected to turn up and be the man doing the legal thing. So that's a little bit about my thinking. Now I'm going to talk about my personal experience, and I do need to give a trigger warning that this part of the presentation does talk about sexual violence. So I apologise, but there's no nice way around this subject. It was a pretty awful period. As I've talked about, I was one of the first women in many organisations. I was the first person to chair a telecommunications organisation in Australia. First woman to be the CEO of an International Olympic Committee company, being on the board of Capgemini. Women in my environment were inspired, men were uncertain, or they went to the whole microaggression thing. What I came to understand, and one of the unfortunate things for women, is we operate in a paradigm of a narrow, short-term, profit-driven cycle that demands numbers now, numbers next week, numbers next month, shareholder value, all of those hard skills. However, the long-term viability of any organisation requires skills such as emotional intelligence, empathy, and compassion. I have friends at the moment who are being paid 10,000 Australian dollars a day to teach our majors and our generals in our army what emotional intelligence is. In that hard, narrow, short-term business model, unfortunately, even in all the years that I've been in professional life, the onus of responsibility has been put back on women to adopt hard skills. The onus has not been put back on the organisations to change to adopt soft skills. Ultimately, I conformed, and that was not good for me. I should have really tried to change things a bit harder. I was silenced when I was on a global international assignment. I had won the largest deal that our company had ever won in its history. Unfortunately, I was sexually assaulted, and that, whilst a traumatic thing for a woman, became almost non-event. Because of the focus of my company on what I refer to as that narrow hard skills model, things that happen to women can be messy. Men very rarely get sexually assaulted. Women get sexually assaulted far more regularly. It was messy for them. Within that narrow business model, they went into what I called hard skills hyperdrive. They were threatened, they were worried about their legal risk, and it exposed the gender gap. What happened to me personally was the things that we hear so much about people with mental health injuries. I didn't speak for 6 months, I was nonverbal, and it wasn't as a result of the violation that had happened. It was a result of the bullying of my workplace. It was the things that they did, I'm going to talk a bit more about in detail. I stopped exercising. I did some very interesting things that I didn't really understand why. I shredded newspapers all day for probably 6 months and put shredded newspaper in plastic bags, garages full of carrot tops. I had shingles. I was literally left with a few people. I was reactive, I was lost, I was depressed, unable to sleep, all the normal things, constant nightmares. I became anxious and I became incredibly paranoid because as the legal case unfolded, instead of my employer doing what I thought they should do, which was to wrap a woolly blanket around me and be caring and kind, they engaged surveillance companies and continued to threaten and frighten me. And it was a fairly difficult period. The sorts of tactics that they used came from that narrow short-term focus that doesn't accommodate soft skills. They used things like the media to undermine my legal case. So I woke up one morning and I was on the front page of the New York Times, I was on the front page of the London Times, I was on the front. Career and respect was suddenly being talked about on pages everywhere all over the place. What that's done is left me with a long tail legacy of people still thinking that this issue is messy or that they should somehow be afraid because, you know, this person is messy and we don't know how to deal with it. They started to take away decisions that I needed to be making offshore. They colluded with staff and they undermined key client relationships. They kept the power dynamic shifting and changing continuously until it was just impossible. I could not have anything to do with them anymore. The consequences of that are still to this day, and we are talking 10 years on. Only a couple of weeks ago, someone said, oh, we Googled you. What happened? You know, if we have anything to do with you, is this going to put us at risk? So the narrative around women having mental health problems somehow becomes threatening and frightening. Whereas I have a friend who goes and conducts training for Beyond Blue, one of our big organisations here. He is a man who has had PTSD and he goes out and does speeches and people clap and talking. Whereas my experience as a woman is that people are frightened because it's just too messy. The outcome for me is that I'm unable to work at what I love to do. I am constantly explaining what happened as if it's somehow my fault or that I had something to do with it. Mine and my family's life plan has changed dramatically, some of it for the good. We are now farmers, which we didn't expect to be. And literally I live between a rock and a hard place every day, and no matter what work I do on recovery, the issue still comes back to me. And because of social media, because people have access to information in ways they never did before, there is really nowhere I can go that allows me to just, you know, matter. And one of the things that we see regularly, and I have seen, is that when these issues happen, women become the focus of the narrative. If you look at two really prominent women we've had in Australia, one was our Australian of the Year. We've heard a lot.
Got a minute,
Been
Shelley.
Sorry? Time?
Yeah, we've got 1 minute. We've got 1 minute, 1 or 2 minutes.
Okay. This young woman suffered sexual assault as a young girl. She became Australian of the Year because of what she did to bring that to the fore. But there's never been any narrative about the man. The narrative is all about her. We've had another woman violated in our Parliament building. It's still the same. The narrative is about the woman. So what sorts of things can be done differently? I'll just talk quickly first about what are I've talked a bit about what happens to women, But the ripple effect is another part. Women are nurturers, they connect community, and these sorts of things ripple out into the entire community. The other thing that's really important is that predominant masculine narrow business model just does not know how to deal with women's mental health. It's uncomfortable to them. It requires that they have some kind of intellectual intimacy and that they have courage and that they have compassion. And when the male predominant model doesn't have those skills, women are silenced. Some of the things that I think can be done differently: zero tolerance against bullying, policies that facilitate mental health recovery for women and acknowledges that their needs are different. Not just a blanket policy that we're going to train people in mental health, but train people in what the issues are for women. Put bystander intervention bullying policies in. Call out microaggressions and deal with them. Get governments to work on policy. But the most important one is compassion training. If I could encourage anybody that's in a centralised organisation that is dealing with this subject, if compassion had been applied in my case, I would have healed and continued working. Compassion requires people to be courageous. It requires action from an individual, not from an organisation, not from a policy. It requires people to be present with what is difficult. And by present, I mean stepping into that and trying to help. It's not something that exists in policy. It's devoid of policy, but it's incredibly rich with humanity. And I would encourage anyone that is writing policy or direction documents to think about how we train executives, government leaders to connect with their innate compassion and teach them to cross into spaces that are messy, because mental health is messy. And policy alone is great, it will teach people so much. But until we give someone the capacity to openly be compassionate, which might mean walking away from the policy, it might mean acting outside of it. Until we do that, this is going to be a very difficult subject. Just a little bit more about me. On closing, you know, keep love alive, I think is really critical. It's one of the things that's helped me heal. I have beautiful cows and they help rewire my brain, because every day you have to love them. I think it's really important that organisations work with people to set boundaries on their loss. Help people walk past and beyond. Once they heal and they come back to work, create ceremonies so that they can close out what doesn't serve them anymore and get ready for the new. And then do what we're doing today. Keep going with the dialogue. Look at how environments can change. Dismantle stigma. Create supportive workplaces. And as I said, just keep going with the compassion initiative. To me, it's the most critical element.
Shelley, thank you for that very generous, very authentic, very tender presentation. To our participants, we are now preparing a beautiful piece of entertainment for you. And I invite you now to reflect on some of the things that Shelley's just shared with us while we set up the tech. What stands out for me is the recognition that these issues for women, the microaggressions, the cultures that create unique problems for women, involve something even more toxic, which is being silenced around them. And when women are dealing with being silenced and they're having a reaction, they are often unseen. And then Shelley directed us to the fact that there's sort of systemic silence, and shared the final solution of compassion. Thank you so much, Shelley. For everyone, I invite you to reflect and pop some notes in the chat about what has stuck for you while we prepare to listen to this treat.
3, 2, 1, roll. Cover speed. Set. Okay, 3, 2, 1, action.
You might never know about yourself enough to know the whys. the things that drive you to and from a person or a place, a feeling or a face, a reason not to stay and do something you love instead. And you might keep the candle burning at both ends until there's nothing left to give a glow and slow you down and let you just breathe in and out, in and out. And you'll say, my God, I got it all. Here's everything I want, but still the high ain't high enough. It's like that wise man said, the birds always get fed. Ain't that enough? Ain't that enough? Ain't that enough? Ain't that enough? Conspires the day you surrender yourself to being yourself in all of your glory, all of your guts and fuck-ups and magic mistakes that made you exactly the way you woke up today. Imperfect and uncompromising. And you can run after fast cars, gold stars, wine bars, and drink nights away with people you don't really love, and surrender to the woozy way you lose yourself. But your heart might always be half what it's meant to be. And you'll say, my God, I got it all. Here's everything I want, but still the high ain't high enough. It's like that wise man said, the birds always get fed. Ain't that enough? Ain't that enough? Ain't that enough? Ain't that enough? And when you're 16 years, or 50 years, or 97 years of living on this earth amount to one single life, will you look back at the stack of fears you shackled yourself to in the hope of becoming taller, trying to touch an ever-moving sky? Or will you see that you've digged deep down into the dark, worked out who you are, forgotten your past, let go of the future, let go of yourself, and realize that everything you need is right here.
How beautiful. This song is called Enough. And the song, the author or the musician is Josie van der West, and she tells us about the song. She said the project emerged from a space after she'd made 5 albums with Oh Wonder. She finished up a world tour, came home, and then thought, well, what's next? There must be more. She said it felt strange that after fulfilling her wildest dreams a few times over, she still couldn't find peace. So she started writing songs to explore where she came from, who she was, why she tried to be an artist, and why, in her words, why I was so desperate for external validation. In her words, why I couldn't find internal validation, and interestingly, how this related to womanhood. She explored idealized expectations of conforming to certain female stereotypes, such as being a good girl, cheerful, smaller, more agreeable, or putting others before her own needs, such as being a mother or a wife. She shared with us this idea, these words, the record has taught me a lot. I've realized that for me, these feelings are not being good enough or not deserving joy, are so intricately tied to my gender. But making it has definitely allowed me to remove the chains of expectation, stop wrestling myself, and enjoy being entirely myself as I come. Enough is about the incessant search for happiness, fulfillment, self-worth, and joy, and the ultimate realization that rather than being found in external validation or achievements, they are found in self-acceptance and authenticity. Joy is inside all of us. These beautiful words and this beautiful song shared by Josie van der West. Now I have the absolute delight to introduce to our group Professor Uneza Nayaz. She's going to talk to us with a presentation called Workplace Issues for Women in Eastern Mediterranean Region and the Cultural Family Challenges. Professor Uneza Nayaz is a consultant psychiatrist and adjunct professor of behavioural sciences and psychiatry at the University of Health Sciences in Lahore, Pakistan, and teaches to medical students and postgraduate students of psychiatry. Dr. Nayaz is president of the Pakistan Society for Traumatic Stress Studies, a very important role. She's the past regional vice president, Eastern Mediterranean region, former board director of the World Federation of Mental Health, and the founding chair of the Women's Mental Health section for the World Federation of Mental Health and the World Psychiatry Association. Dr. Nayaz has published about 160 scientific papers, just a few, several chapters in books, and authored 9 books, including Wars, Insurgencies, and Terrorist Attacks, a psychosocial perspective from the Muslim world, which received a National Book Award. And she's written a valuable book titled The Day the Mountains Moved, Psychosocial Perspectives on Handling Psychotrauma, after the earthquake of 2005. Some significant experiences of Dr. Nayaz are not acknowledged: a knowledge of conflicts in Afghanistan and Pakistan, and working with refugees and internally displaced people, especially women and children. She's also having practical experience of PTSD and displacement and migration. Dr. Nayaz, thank you so much for your time today. We are all honoured to have you and looking forward to this presentation. Just unmute.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. I must say that I'm so overwhelmed with emotions, with different images in my mind, etc., because I'm a woman and I come from the area which you know is Eastern Mediterranean region, and somehow Pakistan is also part of it, though we used to be in the South Asian region. I'd like to say something, that I think women are deeper than any deep sea. There's so much about women. So whether you spend all your life, you read books, you do everything, but still the things are so many things we need to know about women. And I think this beautiful lived experience by the speaker before and the song, I think I'm at that stage of life where I am actually not only doing teaching and I'm a senior person. Let me say that I'm so glad that I became the life member of World Federation of Mental Health, because I was mostly dealing with talking to psychiatrists and psychologists, and I had no idea about other women. So I think World Federation of Mental Health was a great thing, which I think which has taught me a lot. And I have to say that for a long time I've been interested in women's mental health, and I was the founder member of all these sections in WPA, etc., and also the International Association of Women's Mental Health. I was a founder member. But each time, and I have to congratulate Julie for completely, she's reorganized these webinars. They become more lively, they become so different, so inclusive. I must say, Elizabeth, you did a wonderful job, and you are doing a wonderful job. The way you're doing, you're also making comments, etc. So I think we have a long way to go. I don't have much, except that I'd like you women to know. I've heard the pains and miseries, etc., from women from all parts of the world, but you don't hardly have any idea. I think hardly have any idea of Eastern Mediterranean region and the Muslim countries. So I'm going to talk about them today. At the moment, I think the most important thing is, can I change it? What do I do? Yes, okay. What I wanted to say was, because we're talking of workplace, and I think work comes last in any of this region, or any country in the Eastern Mediterranean region, and including the South Asian region, except that you see, they say work is only when you're paid for. But I think women have worked all their lives. The day they're born, they're working. At home they're working. They call, but officially, work means you're working outside and getting paid for it. Now, when women are going outside the house and making money, there are lots of things have happened. I'm just trying to summarize as there's so much to say. But main thing is we need sorry, can I go back to previous one? We need basically a supportive environment that addresses unique challenges that women face. And common thing is, we all know we are not paid equally compared to men. We have caregiving responsibilities, and there's a workplace diversity, different kinds of work. Women going into army, women going into all sorts of things, going to factories, etc. Next one, please. Next slide, please. Now, the EMR region, you'll be surprised. Oh, please, can we go back to the previous one? I don't know. Yeah, the EMR region is the second widest gender gap in the world, with the women earning 12.5% of what men earn. And only 11% of the women in the Arab states participate in the labor force, compared to the 66.2 for the men. Then there's things which are really, really important in our part of the world, is the gender-based violence. Of course, it's everywhere in the world. It crosses all cultures and classes, etc., social classes. But it is pretty bad in the EMR region. Adolescent girls are at high risk of gender-based violence, with sexual exploitation, abuse, trafficking, and female genital mutilation. That's also primarily in Africa, but it occurs in the Middle Eastern region also. Of course, very little access to education. Things have changed. It varies. It's patchy in different, for example, in Pakistan, cities, in most of the places, girls are sent to schools, but at a certain age, like they reach menarche, they immediately stop in villages. Things have changed a lot over the period, but you see in Pakistan, especially in Pakistan, as I am Pakistani, we take one step forward, and then the regime comes, another regime comes, we have to go 2 steps backwards. So it's like that. But women are really, really fighting in Pakistan. And it's a unique Muslim country where I think lots of good things have happened in spite of so many wars and things. We are going through awful political turmoil and etc., etc. I won't go into details. Then we are concerned about the Gaza war, the genocide, and what's happening in Iran. We live in a very strategic position where, Afghan war, etc. I won't go into detail. So our lives have been full of all sorts of things, and as a psychiatrist, I feel I'm like a sponge. And over the period, I've soaked all these things in me. I have to write a chapter for this book, which I wrote for the Oxford University Press, Wars, Insurgencies, and Terrorist Attacks, a psychosocial perspective from the Muslim world. And of course, primarily I am talking there mostly of women and children. And I was just thinking, what am I going to write in this new chapter? It's been 11 years since I've been in Gaza. The first picture you saw in the beginning was me wearing the kafaya, and I was in Gaza at that time. And what you hear every day, the genocide, the this and that, it goes on and on and on. Next one, please. So next one, please. And Pakistan, as you know, please, previous one. Can I have, yeah, no, next one. The one behind. Yeah. Oh, well, okay. Okay, huh. The culture, you see, our culture is very much like Arabs, but again, not to that extent. We were, most of the Pakistanis are immigrants from the colonized Indian subcontinent. And of course, we have quite a few things in our culture which are very much related to Hindus, Turks, Arabs, etc. So it's a multicultural culture in Pakistan. And traditions are very much different compared to the Arab world. But their values and beliefs, basically, the Muslim values and beliefs are very staunch, very strong, and they're there in both the EMR region and in Pakistan. Now, traditions can include rituals, celebrations, or practices that are passed down through generations, such as holiday celebrations, cooking traditional dishes, storytelling, observing cultural ceremonies. Now, it's so interesting that over the years, this hasn't changed. We go home and we get into that. Wherever we've been to Paris, we've been to, I don't know, I mean, you name it, Acapulco, this, that, and the other, we come back and then we just are so ingrained, our minds are so ingrained and our body is so conditioned that we love what our cultures, and this is what is about culture. And women strongly hold on to it, because in some ways it keeps the men healed down. I don't know how to put the word is. So these things are very important. And even marrying, for example, a young girl marrying, of course, she mostly in the past, they didn't ask the girl, though in Quran, both a boy and a girl has to, they're supposed to say yes to this marriage. But in the olden days, the families decided. And I must say that wasn't too bad, because they looked at appropriate families and knew how this young couple could accommodate or adjust. But the worst thing was when a much older man, a very rich man, is married to a very young teenage girl and things like that. So these things are there. And unfortunately, again, I thought, till I was in private practice, I've been in practice in Pakistan for 40 years now. So I'm pretty ancient. And I've noticed over the years that things like Arabia, Saudi Arabia and other places, or any other Muslim country, there are girls who are forced into marriage and they cannot say anything. And it's really painful, and it's happening in the cities like Karachi, Lahore. And you look at the girls, they're so smart, they're well-dressed, wearing Western clothes, speak well, they're highly educated. But can you believe it? My very close friend was married to somebody whom one couldn't think of. And what tragedy, what I think just I heard the experience of the lady who spoke before, lived experience. I can tell you of so many lived experience of people like
2 minutes.
like
2 minutes.
Sorry,
we have 2 minutes. Yeah.
Okay, quickly. So next one, please. Next one, please. So the major. So we have in fact more or less the similar things, that there's a lot of unemployment because the culture is very much a male-dominated culture, and things have changed in the Arab world also, from 18% in 2000 to 22% in 2020. So you can see a little bit of change. Highly qualified women often deal with sexual harassment, especially when they are seen as a strong competitors. And this is the most painful thing. And I have to say this quickly, very quickly, that, women are enemies of women. Unfortunately, I personally experienced this, and I have seen it in most places, that when you are, you have a group of very highly qualified women, when they're competing for the higher positions, your own friends are against you, and they try and devalue you, etc., etc. So I think, if anything I can say from this forum or from this area is that we have to support each other. We have to support each other. It's not the end of the world to become the president now. You can also become it afterwards, and you don't have to be president in any organization. So I think this sort of a thing should go, and we shouldn't always complain men. Additionally, there are lots of barriers. For example, in professional advancement, highly educated, highly talented women, they do not get the professorship. Next one, please. Next one, please. Then I will not repeat all that, but I think the most important thing is that no country in the world has achieved full gender equality, but the Arab region is a diverse grouping of 22 countries in the Middle East and North Africa. It ranks lowest in the world according to the 2016 Global Gender Gap Report. And despite of these advances in women's economic equality in Qatar, Algeria, and United Arab Emirates, at present rate, the region is 39% gender gap compared to 33% in South Asia and 32% in the sub-Saharan Africa. And this will obviously take another 356 years to close. Worse still, I think, is between the patriarchal societies, increased conservative movements, and all societies, whether you agree or not, they're all patriarchal. When it comes to the crunch, yes, they are patriarchal. And there's a lack of political will to move towards gender equality. The Arab world today is seeing a backlash against women's rights and freedom. Next one, please, quickly. I wish I didn't waste time that much. So I think what you need, there's hardly any time, there's so much to say. But what we need is that we need to have national strategies and laws, and the government accountability should be there. Religious scholars, I think they play the worst role, and financial barriers are there. So to gender equality is basically dependent on all these things. If they were in order, the things won't be so bad. Some suggest that policy efforts should focus on decreasing financial barriers to obtain, for example, driving licenses. It's, even driving license is so difficult. It's only lately in Saudi Arabia, women drive. Next one, please. Next one. And then employers can implement policies that promote mental well-being, foster diversity, encourage open discussions about mental health. Ensuring a safe and healthy workplace can lead to improved productivity, and not only productivity, but employees, the people who are employing, their morale goes up. If women are working well, and there are young head of departments who feel very good about it, and they are supporting women. Next one, please. Next one. So there is a change. Please, can I go back to it? Quick. Can I go back to it? Authentic leadership is an extremely effective, evidence-based way to gain trust and lessen stigma. I think what I heard today, and what I will inshallah preach and talk about it, is hearing and feeling and seeing the way the person talks. It touches that part of your heart, or soul, or whatever, that it is different. So we all, I think, now should talk about the positive things rather than and how to allay these pain and misery. And she said compassion. If people were compassionate to her, she would have probably recovered much more earlier. But women are not. On the contrary, they will say things like, oh, she's divorced, oh, she must have done something, oh, she didn't have boys, she didn't have a boy, she had so many girls, etc., etc. But I think most important thing is also that at workplace, one should be able to talk to each other, whether men or women. It shouldn't be a taboo to say that, look, I have had this problem. And so many times I find that women may not be supportive, but young men are supportive. So I think these are the important things. Next one, please. Next one. I don't know, there's so much, but it's like, putting it in just a little shell, what I wanted to say. but wanted to say to you that Eastern Mediterranean women are really struggling in every way, And then the only thing which keeps us strong, I have to repeat again, and what's happening in Gaza and everywhere, is our faith and our spirituality. Our faith and spirituality in this area keeps women and men together. So I think that is the most important thing. And of course, now the new thing which has come up, the well-being thing, please, we all should now start thinking of our well-being. Now, I would say, Elizabeth, you, me, and all of us should think of ourselves, give ourselves a time, take a break, do things which you always wanted to do. Don't let the child die in you, die. I mean, your child and you yourself shouldn't die. We should do silly things, and we should be very supportive, consciously supportive. If not supportive, not be negative. So it's very important that we take home these little things which our great-grandmother said. It's very, so well-being, we have to take care, more so in the case of women. Because if the woman is all right, the whole family will be all right. Thank you very much.
Professor Nayas, thank you so much. Thank you for an extraordinary presentation. Thank you for sharing with us one of the most complex, difficult situations women face around the globe and taking it to the solution that is so grounded, to invite us to play, to invite us to have compassion, and to invite us to look after ourselves. Thank you so much for an amazing presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, we will miss our Q&A time together, but please know we can see your questions in the chat, and as a team we will do what we can to share more information with you. Now it's my deep pleasure to introduce to you our wrap-up facilitator, Dr. Ingrid Daniels. Dr. Daniels is the Chief Executive Officer at the Cape Mental Health in South Africa. She has a Master's in Social Science and a PhD in Social Work from the University of Cape Town, South Africa. She's a past president of the World Federation of Mental Health and an active member of the women's mental health sector. Dr. Daniels is also an honorary senior lecturer in the Division of Intellectual Disability, the Department of Psychiatry and Mental Health, University of Cape Town, and she teaches at the Bochum University of Applied Sciences in Germany. On behalf of the World Federation for Mental Health and in partnership of the City of Barcelos and Recovery IPSS Portugal, Dr. Daniels has actively involved in the planning and launch of the first World Mental Health City in Barcelos, Portugal in December 2023. She's got an extensive resume of publications and presentations delivered at national and international levels. She remains committed to addressing global mental health challenges, and it is our deep pleasure to have her summarize our special privileged time together today. Welcome, Ingrid.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, and thank you very much for the very kind introduction. Good afternoon, well, I should say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all the participants here today. I'm so honored to have been given this responsibility to extract a few but important and critical points raised by our esteemed presenters today. Firstly, I want to bow and say thank you to our presenters for sharing their knowledge, their experiences, but most of all, their lived experiences with such courage and aplomb. Dr. Jasmine Vergara took us on a journey, giving us some indications of the global landscape and context, specifically of mental health in the workplace. She raises and presents to us the World Health Organization's guidelines, including the World Health Organization and ILO policy brief. And there's a reason why these guidelines and policy briefs were established. She notes that good mental health can be obtained in workplaces when there are protective factors and a healthy work environment. She also highlights that 1 in 6 persons working adults have a mental health diagnosis, basically 60%. So people with lived experience work with us, and we ourselves may have a mental health challenge in our workspaces. None of us, as we know, are immune. She further highlights that obviously the quality of life and all those social determinants impact on our mental health daily. But of more concern is the fact that 12 billion working days are lost per annum, and $1 trillion are lost in productivity because of mental health conditions. Ladies and gentlemen, there is an urgent call for us today to focus on mental health in the workplace and to prioritize. She presents to us some solutions by taking us through the World Health Organization guidelines on mental health in the workplace, which is the what, and the World Health Organization and ILA policy brief on how. And these guidelines and policy briefs proposes interventions to us. There are solutions focusing on 3 specific populations: workers with a mental health condition, workers without a mental health condition, and also a more universal approach, anyone in the workplace who needs to be aware of their mental health. These guidelines, she emphasizes, the interventions need to be comprehensive. We need to have a comprehensive approach using evidence-based interventions. There are solutions and there are key strategies that should be implemented in the workplace for all: prevention, protection and promotion, and support. And I believe that the new and upcoming World Health Organization manager training for mental health will go a long way to capacitating managers and workplaces to address mental health. And then we were very honored to have Shelley Oldham present to us her journey. Shelley, I want to say to you that I was moved by your personal story. And you know, you spoke about courage, and I want to say to you, thank you for your courage to share with us today your journey in the corporate world in which you were bullied, and this microaggression, this concept that you spoke about today was actually mind-blowing, and we don't often think of the harmful impact that has on people in workspaces. You spoke so openly and so courageously about the impact this had on your physical, emotional, and psychological well-being. And yet, in all of this, you gave us some way forward. You noted that women are disproportionately affected by mental health injuries after being bullied at work. You spoke about, you raised the question, is it a double or triple jeopardy? But you answered your question by saying it is in fact a triple jeopardy, where we see microaggression taking place in gender roles, emotional labor burden, and work-life balance issues. But Shelley, most of all, you spoke about, you know, the impact this has had. And I believe that your experiences today shared with us is mirrored by so many who experience bullying and microaggression in their workplaces. And you said, as a woman in the corporate world, I have experienced the joy of breaking the ceiling, rising to the top, and the pain of being crushed by its weight. Societal pressure, discrimination, harassment were bread and butter, everyday issues for you. Then came the bullying and everything changed. You said, my workplace was not equipped to deal with mental health injury. Shelley, you highlighted your personal and profound and unique experiences which many women face, and how this impacts on career-limiting consequences, the ripple effect, the confluence of home and work, and systemic silences often. But you take a step back and you present to us a way forward, some actions. You say to us very clearly, we need policy advocacy. We need compassions training, specifically training around compassion towards women in the workplace. And most of all, a zero tolerance to bullying. And I love the way you ended. You said, keep love alive and keep the dialogues going. We have to remove the shame. We need to talk about what women are experiencing in their workplaces and address these factors that harm. And then we had Professor Unezania speak to us specifically about workplace issues for women in the Eastern Mediterranean region. And she so ably and capably presented to us the critical gender gap. It raised an awareness for us today, an awareness we may not have had. The experiences that women in the Eastern Mediterranean region suffers. And she says, the region has the second widest gender gap in the world, with women earning 12.5% of what men earn. Only 11.7% of women in the Arab states participate in labor force, compared to 62% of men. I think, ladies and gentlemen, the stats speak for themselves around this huge gap. And she mentioned the number of influences impacting on this scenario: gender-based violence, limited access to education for women, socio-religious opposition, cultural and family traditions, overlapping cultures and gender biases and stereotypes. She furthermore highlights the major challenges faced by Pakistani women in the workplace. But she ends basically by saying, and putting the spotlight on the rest of the world by saying, even though I've presented to you the issues of women that women face in the Eastern Mediterranean region, she says, no country in the world has achieved full gender equity. And this brings us then to a clarion call for change. And I want to conclude my wrap-up by this call to action. And it's a very specific call that we'd like to make as the World Federation for Mental Health Women section today. It's time, ladies and gentlemen, it is time, and the clock is ticking fast. It is time to prioritize mental health in the workplace, with a special focus on women and the complexities they experience and which impacts on the way they navigate their lives. We call on every institution, every company, every NGO, every state entity, and every country to prioritize mental health and well-being programs in workplaces. This should be supported by clear policy commitment, followed by clear interventions. The World Health Organization provides us with those recommendations and solutions, clear intervention programs and actions. The benefit by far outweighs the costs. Investing in women means investing in your business, but investing most of all in the women of the world who will carry us forward. We call for all our partners and sectors to unite in an effort to prioritize mental health and well-being in workplaces and spaces, to increase the protective factors, and unite in our call to eliminate those risks and stigma which prevent help seeking. We want a commitment to mental health interventions in the workplace. Actions to address mental health is now a priority. And I want to end with Shelley Altman's quote, "Compassion requires courage." Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ingrid. And thank you everybody for attending. Do I pass to our fabulous chair to do our final close?
Yes, just to say gracias. Thank you. Thank you to all of our wonderful presenters. Thank you to everyone who attended and for all your comments in the chat. I wish you safe travels and safe journey, and good morning, good evening, and good night. Thank you. Thank you, Sylvia, and the interpreters. Beautiful. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.